Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Expertise Podcast. I'm your host, Roland Martin, and I hope that today's conversation will expand your knowledge. Today I welcome Kerry Martin to the show. Kerry works for a local university, where he splits his time between managing the general merchandise section at the campus store and as video coordinator for the school's football program. Because I'm currently a student, I found many parts of the conversation very helpful in learning different services that a university campus offers and different things that the staff can do and are willing to help a student with. So found that very helpful. But also at the same time, I really enjoyed learning new things about what Kerry does and some of the work and things that he's involved with. I hope that you too will enjoy this conversation and learn from his expertise. Welcome, Kerry, to the Everyday Expertise Podcast. It's really good to have you here.
It's good to be here, Roland, and an honor to be on your podcast.
All right, excellent. So tell us a little bit. What is it that keeps you busy, or what's your life looking like at the moment?
Well, I have joined the ranks of the working from home.
Ah, yes.
So my life right now is from that perspective. Just little things like downsizing, taking one vehicle off the road.
Okay.
I have one vehicle that just sits in the driveway.
Did you decommission it and everything, or is it
No,
still okay?
no, it's still in fine condition. It just doesn't drive anywhere,
Gotcha,
so
yeah.
it's not insured. And family schedules with one vehicle. We've got 5 kids. So,
Okay.
Just juggling everybody as we, online learning.
Yeah.
Early in the year and a little bit here and there throughout the school year, I expect. That's how it looks. My wife works from home as well.
Okay.
With her piano teaching, and so we've got lots going on from the home.
Yeah. Very good. So what is your work, or just give us a brief description of what you're doing from home at the moment?
So I'm a campus store manager.
Okay.
So normally we would have several retail locations on our university campuses.
Mm-hmm.
And this year we have transitioned to pretty much an e-commerce store.
Okay.
Really not a lot going on in person. We do have some, in-person pickups. So the sort of operating environment that we're in is if you don't need to be there, do
Right.
your work from home.
Yeah.
So we definitely have some staff that are in quite regularly, but being in that sort of middle manager position, I'm in maybe 20% of the time on campus.
Okay. Was the store did it have an online presence before COVID hit, or is this and then you just expanded it, or is it just new since you've kind of been forced to stay at home?
Yeah, so thankfully we did have e-commerce solution for quite a while already. Okay. If I go back in history, I think we were actually one of the first to be able to offer in that era. It would have been just textbooks probably online. It really helped, speed up the lines, and it was like cutting edge.
Yeah.
Now in 2020, it's a must have. So we've certainly dumped a lot of extra resources towards e-commerce.
Okay. So it is
improving.
growing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's certainly not what we're used to, but I think at the end of this all, we'll be in a better position with e-commerce.
Okay. Yeah. Because you've been forced to expand it and grow it a little bit, that kind of.
Exactly.
Throughout this, yeah.
And even things like working with your colleagues remotely.
Right, yeah.
It's not like I didn't have these tools last year, but you sort of compensate, right? You drive an hour for a meeting and maybe push it off too long, whereas now you'll just schedule it in for tomorrow and have a video meeting if you can't be in the same place.
Yeah, exactly. And it when this is all over, hopefully maybe not too long yet, it just gives you maybe a bigger tool bag of things to use, because you've maybe gained some skills in video conferencing or just gotten used to it, and that's a possible option when it is the best option.
Yeah, and I like to look at it that way too, of, here are the opportunities that this challenge presents us with.
Yeah. Very good. So I have here, what does a typical day look like for you? So what are kind of some of your main tasks or some of the things that you do?
Well, so right now to kind of simulate going away to work, ideally in the morning I try to get outside and go for at least a walk around the
Oh,
block.
nice. Yeah.
And, I'm not one of those fans of staying in your PJs all day to work, although I will admit to maybe doing a little more comfortable clothes these days.
Okay.
Um, but with, the kids being in school and stuff, that's kind of the first rush, get them out the door and
Right.
then settle into a lot of email, a
Okay.
lot of Zoom meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I use Zoom to kind of cover all the video platforms
Yeah.
because you use them all these days. Um, I do find things take more time
Okay.
because you're having, a video conversation where maybe you would just talk to a colleague in the hall,
Right.
or at the water cooler, so to speak.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of customer service and projects, I would say too.
Okay.
Definitely, I think we alluded to it about, benefits of a pandemic. Well, one is that some of those projects that you didn't have dedicated time for,
Yeah.
um, I don't want it to sound like I've got copious amounts of free time because it hasn't worked out that way,
Right.
but there's been more project time too. So
Okay. Like a new development of some kind, or?
yeah, in our case, like one of the big things would be the software platform for inventorying and for accounts
Mm-hmm.
payable, like very integral to what we do.
Yeah.
And e-commerce ties into that as well. So that foundational, we would call it ERP,
Okay.
enterprise resource planning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that system is a really big project to take on if you're going to replace it or even upgrade
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So that's probably the one biggest, and then there's all these small ones that are a result of the pandemic, like chatbots for your website and
Oh, yeah.
just different ways to service your customer remotely.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's definitely where we found we were weak.
Okay.
In September, going back to school, is just the flow of customer requests and complaints, or
Yeah.
just service needs, how to respond with people working all over in different areas,
Yeah.
from
Oh,
home,
yeah.
some on campus, some on another campus. It got to be a challenge when you weren't used to working that way.
Yeah. That's interesting. Just those things that, like, as a customer, as a consumer, I don't think about that's needed to maybe change as it's gone on, and I don't think about things on the other end of how my request or my complaint gets dealt with if I'm having an issue. So I can see how you're trying to make that work better, and like you talked about the chatbot things, I think that's what you called it. Like, the better you have that, then that if a customer can just be helped with that, then it doesn't tie up a staff member to take care of that issue and that kind of thing, right?
Well, yeah, like, to use a simple example, if you've got one person on the phone all day, just in this scenario, telling people where their pickup locations are during the pandemic, curbside pickup is here, here, and here, and it's these hours.
Yeah.
You could have people trying to man the phones and trying to get through on phones, or a chatbot can really answer that right away.
Yeah.
And
Simple
then
things like that. That
request ends right there.
Yeah. They don't need to tie someone up. Yeah. Yeah. Very good. We'll possibly get back into some of these things as we talk about kind of some of the things that you have to think about with running a store and that kind of thing. Or if you have more to say on that, that's fine. But also, do you have other hobbies or interests that you want to share outside of your work?
Yeah, when I think about hobbies, I guess for me, it goes probably in two categories. One, I would say, is music. Participating in choirs and so on is something I've always enjoyed. And, the family I grew up in, it was an important thing. And so I've enjoyed continuing that in various community choirs and so on. And sports would be the other thing. I feel like I don't hardly participate in any anymore. I take my kids to do things.
Okay.
But hockey would be the one that's nearest and dearest to me. And I would say I'm a bit of a survivalist in probably golf and snowboarding. So survivalist in that, I can show up and not look completely dumb,
Right.
but I'm definitely not, a master
Yeah.
of those two things.
Yeah, very good. Anything else with that you wanted to talk about?
Well, just to clarify, I'm not a master in hockey either.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very good. Yeah. And yeah, I'm kind of still thinking about yourself here. I always like hearing how you kind of got into the work that you're doing now, and I always find it fascinating to hear the story of how someone got into their job, whether it's something that they specifically had been planning for a long time and took a lot of deliberate decisions to get to that point, or if it's something that that kind of just happened or evolved over time. So I'm curious for you, how did you find yourself at where you are now? Was it something that you deliberately chose when you were 20, or is it something that's kind of happened over time?
Yeah, so actually that's a good segue with hobbies and stuff too, because I will admit technology and audio-visual stuff, that's another hobby of mine that I didn't really mention. But I would say early on in my childhood, I was just really intrigued with, wow, a computer. Like it was kind of that era. I remember one at my grade school where, everybody would crowd around and play like these two very lame games in today's standards.
Like this was the 90s?
Yeah, like the 90s. And we're talking like, a couple colors on the screen and like this volleyball-ish sort of game and something that they called a flight simulator, but the graphics, like you'd hardly recognize it as the Earth. That's my first like kind of memory of technology. And then somewhere along the line, we, inherited somebody's hand-me-down, and, I was intrigued with taking it apart.
Okay. Like this is at your home.
Yeah. And, if my dad's 8-track player wouldn't work and like he had kind of like been okay with it going to the trash,
Right.
I would take it apart and try to make it work.
Yeah.
So I remember having like stereo components apart, and that just always intrigued me. And as long as I had taken it apart, I generally could get it back together again.
Okay. Would you need to like look up how to do it, or was it something you would just figure out out how to do it?
No, I was like grab a screwdriver and experiment.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. That wasn't me growing up, but I'm fascinated by reading stories of people that have been successful in technology and that kind of thing, whether it's building, like having their own computer company or that kind of thing. It often seems that they tinkered a lot as a child and enjoyed learning how things worked and kind of figuring it out as you go. So I was fascinated by that was your experience as well.
Yeah, and then by the time, I got to high school, I went to public high school then for grades 11 and 12, and, with your electives, you could choose things like technology as, a class. And so that's something I right away signed up for, the 2 or 3 that I could sign up for. And that sort of progressed to the next level, where I had signed up for co-op.
Okay.
And, I kind of gave the co-op teacher a vague description of like, I want to do something with computers. It was probably that basic.
Okay. Were you thinking like computer service and repair kind of thing, like building computers, or were you like into programming and that kind of thing too?
More in the service aspect of it, I think. Like any sort of electronics repair, kind of maybe going back to what I had tinkered with.
Right. Yep.
As a kid, I was like, oh, that'd be fun if I was like the repair guy. But I didn't really know what I wanted either. Like I didn't really know even the options, right?
Right.
Like what's in that field. Anyway, my co-op teacher came back to me and he said like, hey, I've got this position at a university. Do you think you'd be interested with their IT department? I was like, yeah.
So this is in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go for an interview, which was kind of intimidating. just showing up at a university campus for an interview as a high school kid.
Mm-hmm.
But it went well. The thing I remember from this, and this is one of those lifelong lessons, is don't spell the name of your employer wrong on your resume. Now,
You did that?
Yeah. Yeah, and the manager called me out on it. I think he was pretty nice to me because he felt bad I was a high school student, but he said something along the lines of like, normally these resumes would just go in the garbage. But yeah, I think he had a little mercy on me that day because of maybe my age and the type of position I was applying for.
Nice.
Since I was essentially working for him for free.
Right. Yeah.
But that's where I got my start, and literally it was technicians there that I was allowed to work with.
Okay.
And just do hands-on things with them for a whole year.
Wow.
That was the start of it, and it's kind of evolved from there.
Yeah. So you were working on the computer systems and that kind of thing, or what was that? What was that co-op?
So
Some of the work you did.
Yeah, it would have been a lot of like desktop client support, right?
Okay.
So, faculty member calls in, has an issue with their computer. A decade and a half ago, things were more one-on-one with technology, whereas now you'd administer everything centrally.
Yeah.
So, you would go to their office, I would go with the technician, he'd get me to help, install operating systems or, fix drivers. Like these are the things you used to have to do.
Yeah.
And you still do, but it's much more automated now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of learned from being on the job, working with the technicians that you were following around and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So like at that point, I really didn't have a lot of background other than, like I said, some high school courses that sort of got my feet wet. Mm-hmm. And lots of personal experimenting.
Yeah. So after high school, did you continue in that job or did you go on to something else, or what happened then?
Yeah, so I remember that conversation I had too. So this is the manager that had hired me for co-op. Mm-hmm. Somewhere along the line, I worked up the courage to say like, hey, could we talk about a position next year? Because I'd like to work here for real.
Nice.
And I kind of expected what I got, which was... he laid out, the plan that he would like me to pursue, which was, you should take this opportunity to get your degree now while you're young and, make sure you check those boxes and jobs will be here waiting. I mean, with where my life was at right then, I was sort of wanting to get employed and then worry about the schooling and so on. Yeah. But he did come back to me then with, a limited term contract. Okay. And that's the way things often work. I would say in a bigger institution is, some limited term contract work until there's a position that you're qualified for or becomes available. Okay. So I did that for a few years, and that was sort of an evolution as well. Okay. Kind of from projects to, I think it was, I don't even remember what I did initially. I think Windows 98 upgrades maybe. Okay. Yeah. And like Y2K bug. Like this is the type of stuff like where you had to go to each computer and, check something or do something, kind of the monotonous stuff that your real technicians wouldn't have needed to be tied up with. Yep. But it was good and it got me in tons of doors, faculty members that I still sort of have a relationship with because of that experience way back where I like to think I took good care of them. And so we have a good relationship. Yeah. And then that morphed into, a position where I took care of all the computer labs on campus. Okay. So that was more of a central admin type thing. Yep. Because, it was lots of computers. Yep. And that was a part-time position. Okay. And to fill the other part-time, the campus store at that point was saying like, hey, we should be offering computer repair services, but we can't. They hadn't been yet. They hadn't been at that point. I mean, people had computers, but it's not like everybody had a laptop either. Oh, I see. Yeah. Right. Like it's not
I'm forgetting
I
how
say
long
it's
ago
not
this
that.
was.
Well, but it isn't long. Well, I guess it depends on your perspective, right? Like I had 10, 15 years ago, well, probably 15 years ago, like people were not carrying laptops to class. Like
Okay.
everybody wasn't, for
Right.
sure. I don't even remember what the state of laptops would have been in that era, but um, yeah. So anyway, they thought it would be a good service to have for
Hmm.
students on a campus, which I agree, it's still a good service to have on a campus.
Yeah.
And I ended up with these two part-time roles for quite a while.
Okay, so you were working for the bookstore in this repair
Mm-hmm.
technician job?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And just the types of things that the store would offer. I mean, traditionally it would be a hard copy textbook
Yeah.
and hoodies in your school colors,
Right.
right? And that was the campus store for the most part.
Hmm.
Or if you go way back, yeah, I don't know exactly what, probably punch cards for exams, right? But
Yeah.
the basics you need for campus life have evolved too.
Yeah.
And so we started carrying technology products.
Okay.
And, at one point then I became the buyer for that category
Oh, okay.
where I would, purchase the product that we would resell then in that whole category, technology category.
Okay.
And as I say, that job was full-time job first. So that's when I made the move from IT over to retail, campus
Okay.
retail. If it would have went the other way, I'd probably still be in IT, but
Hmm.
at that point it made sense, and I've really enjoyed the transition over to retail then.
Okay. So, yeah, so since you've been doing retail full time since then, is that what you were saying, or?
Yeah, yeah, and where I'm currently at is I would manage the category buyers for the different lines that we carry, I'll say.
Okay.
So I'd be responsible for any items that aren't course materials. So,
Okay. I was going to ask you if you're in charge of that as well, but that's a separate.
yeah, we would
Okay.
have, like, that's a pretty big, I'll call beast to
Yeah.
manage as well, just because that's a lot of faculty interaction. And
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
we might get to this later with services of a bookstore, but
Mhm.
yeah, that's a different side of our business for
Okay.
sure.
So are you pretty much working with anything that's not course materials?
Yeah.
Like, if it's not a textbook or something like that, it's you're
If it's if it's
thinking about
not a
it.
book,
Okay.
chances are I've got something to do with it, and just our general day-to-day operations as well. Those are indirect reports of mine as well.
Okay.
So like our cashiers and student, extra help
Okay.
as we
Yeah.
as business requires, part-time work.
Right. Oh, so you have to, like, maybe the beginning of September, you have to get a few more people
Yeah.
on board and
Yeah, a
helping
lot
out.
more.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if you would graph our business, September is a crazy peak,
Okay.
and then it's a lot of low even time from there. So that presents its own challenges with
Yeah.
running a business when you have such strong peaks and then long periods of considerably less business activity.
Right. Yeah. Do you find that January and May, I guess, are those big peaks as well, or not? Is September the biggest of the?
Yeah, so September and then January is a little bump, and then in the case of the university I'm at, our summer term is not that substantial, so
Okay.
there is a little bump there, but it's not nearly the peak of September.
I
or
guess
even
in
January.
September, even students are moving in to the city for the first time, or like I guess they'll be getting things that they will have then when January rolls around and that kind of thing. So that probably explains why it's
Yeah.
busier in that time even than the start of the next term.
Yeah, the majority of what they need is in those first and second years.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, very good. And yeah, I'm looking forward to, as a currently being a university student, I'm kind of, as we get a little further on, when we go into a little more of what a bookstore offers and that kind of thing, I'm curious to learn a little bit more of what things look like from your end. So I'm sure I'll have more questions for you there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever take any classes yourself or as you were working at the university?
Yeah, so I mean, some of the, like, I definitely got some technical certifications as time
Okay.
went on too, with working in a fairly big IT department. Well, depends who you compare to again, but
Okay.
there's lots of people in the IT department on campus, and they would bring in a trainer for, let's say when every version of Windows moved,
Right. Yep.
for example, and those certifications were offered as a benefit. Like I didn't even have to pay for them; they were
Okay.
covered by my employer.
Nice,
So
yeah.
that was very good about working there. So I definitely had some technical certifications in that regard. And then for school, I I did a business diploma as well, part time. So I always say I'm not done with my schooling yet.
Okay.
But it's also not like right now my priority is family, and
Right.
I,
Yep.
I know that's a significant time commitment in evenings in particular if you're trying to maintain a job. So
Yeah.
yeah, I enjoyed my business diploma, and we'll see what the future has.
Okay. Very
Yeah.
good. Yeah, that's great. Did you do that part-time while you were working, or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. On the side of working. So you do have a bit of experience with how much time it takes to work a full-time job and then do school on the side,
Yeah,
or?
and how it is to do a 3 hour lecture after a full day at work, like 7 to 10. 7 to 10
Yeah.
is a doozy of a time slot. I'll just put that out
Yeah,
there.
I've never done that, so good for you for that. Um, so as you were, well, as I've known a little bit about you, and from what you were telling me too in preparation for this interview, I know that you've been involved somewhat in working with the video coordination, or I don't know how you describe it, for the football team as well. So tell me a little bit about how that came to be, and what that involves.
Yeah, so I mean this is sort of part B to my campus activities is the video coordinator role for football. So when I started there, I would say I knew nothing about football.
Okay.
And technology was what brought me to it.
Mm-hmm.
So the head coach at the time, and we still joke about it now as far as technology is concerned. I think he thinks I still have all his passwords from like 10 years ago or 15 years ago for his BlackBerry. And we have a good relationship anyway. He would need help with certain things, and he'd drop by our repair service at the
Okay.
bookstore.
So you kind of developed a relationship through your tech work, and okay, yeah.
Right. And like over time, I guess probably did some little favors here and there or spent a little extra time. And he got to know me. And football was in a pretty successful era at that point in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Like they'd won a national championship, and being involved in or enjoying sports, like any sport. I got introduced to it. The campus wasn't that big.
Oh, okay.
And
So you were like following along with the team and that kind of thing?
yeah, so like I would say because they were so successful, you couldn't help but follow them on a small campus.
Gotcha, yeah.
And, being there in person, in a packed out stadium when they won a national championship, and everybody's going over the railings, and it was kind of bedlam, and we were selling all sorts of purple things
Right.
afterwards. Because I always say there's a pretty direct relation with how successful we are in athletics to how successful we can be at a campus store.
Really? Okay.
Because the excitement level is definitely tied to how they feel about their university.
Yeah.
Right. So if athletics is doing well, if academics are not to be set as a second tier thing by any stretch. If the university has a good reputation, people are proud to wear that brand,
Right.
and
Yeah.
people want to be associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good era for all,
Yeah.
I would say, in that period.
Fascinating, yeah.
And believe it or not, in like mid 2000s, they still did video on VHS tapes.
Okay.
So this is just prior to my time. I'm told they used to have to like run to a Greyhound station, put VHS tapes on a bus, which I guess delivered between like towns across Ontario, and like the tapes from your next opponent would come like on a Wednesday, and you would put your tapes in the mail on the Monday, and then you I don't know what the exact dates were, but there was this whole like process of getting
Wow.
physical tapes around.
So were they behind the times, or was that the technology that was available at that time?
Well, so again, this was like last year that they were doing it.
Okay.
So they were probably at that point behind the times.
Yeah.
But not by that far.
Yeah.
Right? But it was time to do something.
Yeah.
So digital video comes in. I don't think it went well the first year.
Okay. This is still before you were involved?
This is still before we were involved, and it went, I had done a little project, for, this is one of the favors I guess I did for Coach, is, I cleaned up a copy of the game, like taking all the, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, like all the commercials out and, things like that.
Yeah.
So that the players could have sort of a memento of that game.
Oh, okay.
Like just a clean one to watch, right? Yeah. And I think he sort of had it in his head, well, if he can edit a video, he can probably be a video coordinator. Like, do you want the job? And that's how I got that job.
Okay. Very good. So it was the coach that hired you? Was it a paid position or?
Yeah, so it is a paid position. I mean, be under no illusions, it's a fairly modest stipend.
Okay.
But there is a little bit of money there for your time. But yeah, certainly not what you bank on.
Okay, yeah. And it's something that you've been doing since then, right up till now, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's definitely been an evolution, but I've continued on in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
Since then.
Very good. So you're working with others, obviously, in this role. Do you have a team that does the video for the football team?
Yeah. So I don't know if we want to touch on it later when we're talking about some of the specifics of how we manage that. I have a very good video. I did assistant coordinator, I would call him, who has been with me for quite a while.
Okay.
He had a few. Actually, I think he only missed one season with me. But he had two CFL seasons where he went to work for them for a bit and then came back. Just the way employment opportunities worked out for him.
Okay.
So that's, he's the core that continues on, and we have a really good working relationship now as to who does what and how we manage that. And then I have usually a team of 4-ish student volunteers as well.
Okay.
So that's kind of the extent of my team, 4 to 6 people. Probably.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll have some questions for you and things about more specifics of that role a little bit later on. Maybe just to kind of round out what you've been talking about here with your kind of personal story or personal experience. You were telling me that you've been involved with, I'm not sure if organizations or things that kind of outside of maybe involved with other campus stores and that kind of thing. So what's been your experience like working with others outside of the institution you work for, your employer?
Well, first of all, it's one of those things I'm always hesitant just to sign up unless I can give it a good shot as far as time. But the benefit, and to me it's a really big benefit, and whether it's the football side or the campus store side, when you're involved with, I'll say, the industry, you see things on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
You can get very set in your own way of doing things over time.
Yep.
The longer you're doing it, the more you reinforce your own beliefs that you're doing it all right.
That's right. Yeah.
Or wrong. And it's good to see how it works in other places. So I usually joke that I see 2 places on university campuses. I generally visit athletics and the campus stores.
Okay. When you go to other campuses.
When I go to other campuses. So I mean, I've been at quite a few, and that's one of the benefits you get of working with the organizations is you get to visit more campuses. Like, for example, a downtown Toronto or Vancouver, store has a much different feel than, say, something in the prairies, like a USask or something in, Waterloo, Ontario, or Lakehead, Thunder Bay.
Right, yeah.
And then, on the American side, you drop into a school like Tennessee, both on the football and the store side, and things are a completely different scale.
Wow.
So it just I always find I can learn something from the very smallest campus to the very largest. There's something there to take away, and if not try, maybe even implement.
Yeah. So is there kind of an organization that brings together different bookstore managers or campus store managers, that kind of thing, or how does that work?
So there's an organization. We're called Campus Stores Canada. So
Okay.
that's actually a board that I'm currently on.
Okay.
And they represent, I would say, independently owned stores. So there are, like I'll use the U.S. as an example because you probably recognize the names more, but like a Barnes and Noble would run some university campus stores.
Okay.
But then the university owns them and manages them. And so I would say a pretty good percentage, like probably most of the ones in Canada are owned by the university, but there are both ways, right? There are at least two different ways to run a store, right? So, I'm not exactly sure where that train of thought was going, but
you were talking about the organization that you're on the board with. Is the purpose just to get ideas from each other and to coordinate, or what's the main vision of that board?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. That's what I was talking about with it's to bring institutionally owned stores together and pool their resources and their ideas and their talents. So one of the things I like about the whole campus store industry is that nobody really competes against each other.
Is that just the nature of it?
Yeah. Right? Like, I mean,
I'm not going to visit another university store most likely to get the things I need. Is that kind of the...
Yeah. Like, generally speaking, right? Like, in theory, if there's two universities in a city, say like, Waterloo or
right.
Toronto, where there's campuses side by side or very close, you could, in theory, undercut them on some materials, but like nobody really...
I never even thought of doing that, so I guess that shows that
nobody really does it. But if you have, I mean, we're talking about advantages of campus stores. I guess that's one. If you have a couple in your city, just because one doesn't have it doesn't mean the other one won't.
Right. That's true.
But yeah, as a general rule, they don't compete against each other, so people are very free to share.
Oh yeah.
Right. Like, if you want to use the word steal, like we steal each other's ideas all the time, and it's better for the industry.
Yeah.
Sometimes it gets into a little bit of advocacy too. The government will ask for different, input on, say, like copyrights and fair use and different things like that. And an organization like Campus Stores Canada would have, an opinion on that and input to give.
Yeah, that's great. And I can see especially how the collaboration can be a powerful thing when you're willing to share ideas and learn from each other, and you're not trying to keep things tight to to try to keep things to yourself, and how that can be a powerful environment for improving and getting new ideas. That's great. I'd like to get since we're talking about bookstores anyway, I'd like to get a little bit into some of the specifics of your job and what a university bookstore does. Maybe you did answer this, but is the one that you work for, is it owned by the university?
Yeah,
versus
so
being its own thing?
Yeah, so it would be owned and managed by the university.
Okay. Yeah, very good.
So I mean, benefits I would see to that would just be the flexibility of the university to have their store be what they want it to be.
Yep.
If you bring in an outside provider, and this applies for different things like food, housing, whatever.
Yeah.
You have less control of that because they're reporting to their shareholders.
Yep.
In our case, the shareholder is the university,
right.
and I guess the students, right?
Yeah.
So at least on a high level, it should be for the students.
Yeah.
Like, that's the primary driver.
Yeah.
And for the university.
So I guess maybe that gets to kind of my first question in this section. How would you describe the main goals and vision of the university bookstore? So I mean, it's interesting to me that it's owned by the university, like you say, because I think that does make a difference in what they're trying to accomplish. But how would you describe what your vision is as working for the bookstore?
Yeah, so in this one, I thought I'd just give you the mission and vision statement that we've got, since our team put a lot of time into this at one point to come up with these three
nice.
sentences.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it says it fairly succinctly. So our mission is to foster student success and enhance the campus experience by providing competitively priced, relevant products, innovative services, and deliver them with genuine customer-focused staff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's our mission.
Yeah.
Give students what they need, do it kindly,
Yep.
and try to be as competitive as possible in the marketplace.
Yeah. So would you say, since we talked about how you're not competing with other campus stores, would you say that online marketplaces are a big competitor, or who do you find you're competing against?
Yeah, so 100% that has completely flipped the publishing landscape on its
Okay.
head, for one.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at independent bookstores, like
Yeah.
in just regular book titles. Even you walk into Chapters Indigo these days. There's a lot of home decor in there,
There
not
is,
just
yep.
books, right?
Yeah.
Like, the whole publishing industry is different now.
Yep.
So, the online company that starts with an A that we all buy things from, we try to be very straightforward with our students. And so this goes to some of the benefits of the store again, but we'll just offer a price comparison on our website directly to that retailer. Okay. Now, the advantages, again, that a store can bring is they have the stock there.
Yeah.
Some of these online retailers might show it, but it might be a really far ways away and take a really long time to come, and or hidden fees, and or be a pirated copy that's falling apart. Like there's some other issues that you have to be aware of, but it's certainly a competitor, and it certainly, I think, has benefited students too, because it required everybody to be sharper.
Yeah, because that competition usually benefits the consumer. So the fact that you guys have to think about what are Amazon's prices when you price something, is that kind of what you're talking about? That's who you're competing with?
Yeah. And even formats and stuff, that's another value add that it can bring. So like the campus store will rent you your textbooks. I don't know if you knew that, but like you can buy them new. You can, if they're available, and this is where students can be skeptical sometimes, is like, if they're available, you can buy them used. Yeah. But again, students can be skeptical of that because they're like, well, you never have any. Yeah. Sometimes there just aren't any to get, right? And that's what the campus store would try really, really hard to have all of those options.
Right.
Whereas an online retailer would probably just have the physical, maybe in a paper, in a hard cover. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Do you provide, will you buy back textbooks from students?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so again, that's supply and demand, and the realities of supply and demand sometimes are not that great. So your perfect scenario as a student would be if that book is used every semester, and your university is using it again next semester. Exactly. You can sell it back at an okay price. Yeah. Right. And then it goes back in the system and gets resold again. If it's not on the book list for next semester, potentially never again. Yeah. And then you get offered like $2 to buy back your book, and you spent, $80 on it. Yeah. It's a tough pill to swallow. And again, I think it's one of those consumer transparency things that just people aren't aware of. Yeah. How supply and demand works sometimes, and it's perceived to be that you are just gouging students. So. Yeah, I can, and that seems to be the case often, that textbooks will change often enough or update their edition or something like that it's hard to find a market for the one that you just used in the last semester. And I think that's another benefit of the competition, is just that students, the consumer, has very low tolerance for edition updates that don't bring value. Yeah that's right? For sure. And so a store gets caught in the middle a little bit with that, anyway, that's a whole separate topic over how content is created for education, but challenges for sure.
And did you say that's not really your role?
Yeah,
It was
no.
working. I mean, you probably know some about it because you're involved with the store, but
so certainly it's a big piece of our overall feasibility as to like the services we offer. But it's not what I'm directly managing.
Okay. So yeah, let's get into that a little bit. What are some of the decisions that you have to make? What are some of the things that in your manager role that you're thinking about and implementing?
Yeah, so my perspective, I would say just it needs to be one of, just having a critical eye on our processes.
Okay.
So a lot of the time it's just making sure that we're consistent,
okay.
that our customers communicated with,
mm-hmm.
that we're, budgets, the budgets that I'm responsible for, that overall strategy gets communicated to our buyers so that we're buying the right things, mm-hmm. so that we can meet our overall financial goals.
Yep.
So you end up doing a lot of, I would say, systems projects and, checking in, reporting, to make sure that your trajectory of your current fiscal situation is lining up with your goals.
Yeah. So are you thinking about what the store offers, like as far as products and services? Is that involved in your role, or in that what you're talking about there with making those decisions?
Yeah, certainly. So this is an easy one now to refer back to, but when I started in a campus store, that was an era where there wasn't technology sold in the store,
right.
and students were limited, right? So the store at that point adapted, said we should offer repair services and sell, your cables and adapters and
right.
all these other things that you need as a student. What are those next things? Hard to say.
Yeah.
Right. That's always what you're trying to find, is what is your, what need is not being met on mm-hmm. campus. Because ideally, students usually have limited transportation options.
Mm-hmm.
If we can give them similar value overall, maybe it just saves 45 minutes on a bus to get to them all or whatever.
If you can offer that
mm-hmm.
same thing. Is there something like that since you've been doing this, that you've brought in, or a new product or service that you've offered that's just like been worked really well and is a need that you could meet and was accepted well and continues to be? Can you think of anything like that right off?
So off the top of my head, I'd struggle to name a category, but I would say within all the categories, like obviously clothing has its trends.
Yeah.
Obviously technology.
Yeah.
Ebbs and flows with what's released, so that's more dictated to you. Some years you're buying hoodies in a certain size range, and the next year people are buying stuff bigger, so all of a sudden your big sizes sell out. Like those are the kind of like micro adjustments that you always have to be making. As far as a completely new category, our situation is we're in a city, so there are other options for like food and so on. Like, so you'll see some university campuses, especially I'll say ones on the left coast, where ethically sourced food is a big thing.
Oh yeah.
They'll be able to offer a niche grocery store even on campus.
Okay, yeah.
And I would say that's where all of these different dynamics come in, depending on where your university is. What are those other options around the corner? Like, we're not going to have maybe our campus can't have a pharmacy because there's a pharmacy right across the road. But if there wasn't one, you're always looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, I guess I just limit myself so much because I think bookstore or campus store, I think books. And like you mentioned, like clothing, that's kind of the typical things that are thought of. But there's probably all kinds of things that can be offered and probably are being offered that I'm not even aware of, that depending on a student's situation they'd be very happy to take advantage of and can use. Can you think of, I asked you if there's something that's worked really well. Can you think of anything that you've tried that's just been an absolute flop in your specific situation and that you had to get rid of shortly after? Or?
Again, I would say it's a similar answer. I'm trying to think of something. Nothing's coming right.
I'm putting you right on the spot with these
right
questions,
off the top of my head. But certainly in a clothing design, I mean, some you can just tell they don't hit.
Yeah.
Right. Like
they just don't sell.
It's just like it seemed like a good idea at the time, and I mean, that's part of what I do as a manager too, is try to limit our exposure on those types of things by saying, maybe just keeping like we call it like a classic look, right? Like
I see.
Like a clean and classic. Try not to be too trendy.
Yeah.
You need some of that, right? You need some of that, but that mix is you don't want your store to be 80% trendy because trendy changes tomorrow.
Yeah.
And same with technology, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Like USB cables are the same as they were 5 years ago. Well, for the most part, depending on the device. But there's other things that, flowery phone cases may not.
Right.
Might not hit today and they did last year.
Do you sell more like regular books and that kind of thing too, or like games and some of those things as well? Yeah,
so games is a category. So I would say one of the big topics on university campuses, particularly during COVID too, is mental health. And so I would say like overall wellness and like doing other things like playing games and some of those I'll put them in the self-care category. That's a category that we would not have had before. So thanks for reminding me on that.
Okay.
But that is something we'd have now. You could come in and you'd probably recognize many of the game titles that are carried in our campus store. And it's not like we have, huge amounts of floor space dedicated to it. But we have some.
Yeah, that's something that I was kind of surprised when I walked into my university's store for one of the first times. I'm like, oh yeah, you got a whole game section. I guess that makes sense. But just some of those things I wouldn't have thought about that a campus store would offer. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Like for example, Spike Ball.
Oh, okay.
I hit that at a trade show like a decade before it hit this community.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been selling it for years.
Well, no, we actually didn't, because we were like, could we convince people to spend, $80 on a little plastic ring and 2 balls? But I mean, I think you know some people that play the game in our immediate area here, and it's become quite popular.
Well, I've seen it on campus a bunch the last year. I've been surprised because I've known it, like the Mennonite community's known it for played it for the last 5 years or so, but I've been surprised how much I've seen it around campus and things in the last year.
But that's a great example of a game that doesn't take a lot of space.
Yeah.
You can take it outside, set it up, get some outdoor, because I mean, let's look at like people that are living on campus or even near campus generally don't have big properties, right? They don't have a ton of space.
Exactly.
And they need to get out of their buildings. So it's good to have some of those options.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as a student, I was kind of curious about this. If there's things that a campus store offers that I could be taking advantage of that I'm not even aware of or not taking the time to check into. So I wondered if you have things to say on what you offer as a store that you wish more students would know about or take advantage of, and just some of the things that you offer.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not my area of expertise, and I mentioned it a little bit already with the whole book thing. I'll just mention it briefly again. Is on the affordability of course materials and the people that can help you navigate that. Because I think the takeaway as a student, what I would say to you is ask the staff, because they do really know what's going on.
Okay.
I find people, I should say students, are really skeptical of the answers that they're getting. Like there's some, maybe hidden agenda to... Well,
I definitely have that perception that they're working to make as much money as possible, and so they're going to potentially take advantage of me. So it's really good to know that most of these campus stores have the goal of helping the students and aren't maybe their main goal isn't to just make every buck that they can and that kind of thing. So just hearing that was like, it's good to know, and maybe I should be taking more advantage of asking and having the experts help me on what the best option is for me. Is that kind of what you're saying with that?
Yeah, exactly. Because so I would say on that side, just I mentioned I'm a bit arm's length to that part of our business, but the team has really evolved there to become that liaison between faculty and students and I'll say publishers or creators of the content.
Yeah.
So some content is provided for free, right? You've probably heard of open educational resources. The idea that it's a free book.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to be frank, nothing's free.
Yeah.
And even if funding was provided from government or wherever to create that initial content, it needs to be maintained.
Yeah.
And I think over time, people are starting to understand that, open resources are still not free resources.
Yeah.
And there are people, professors sometimes, often, that need to be compensated for their time somehow.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Now, how that all gets funded, that's a bunny trail we won't go down. But just to say that it's the goal of a campus store, or it should be, and certainly is for us, to have that conversation with the faculty member who ultimately makes the decision what is being used.
Right.
The bookstore does not.
Yeah.
Right? There is not a campus store that says this is the book for this course.
Right.
But sitting down with a faculty member and saying, hey, this pile of stuff you just submitted as content for your course is going to add up to be X number of dollars. Are you sure that's the mix?
So you're having those
yes.
conversations. Okay. Yeah.
And technologies help with this too, is when they submit those materials, they can kind of see what the overall price is going to be to the students, not just some sales rep who tells them it's the best thing ever and students are going to love it. Or they don't have to spend any of their time marking because the online component just takes care of it, right? Like they have all of those conversations. So the goal would be to give the faculty member all of the information so that they can make an informed choice, so that there's as many options available for the students as possible.
Right.
So for you, you might prefer a hard copy textbook.
I do. Yes, absolutely.
Right. I didn't know if you did or not, but
no,
if you do, hopefully there's an option. If there is an option to have hard digital and say maybe a used, I would be ideal probably in your case. If you're wanting hard, it'd be nice to have a used copy.
Right.
We try to offer as many of those options as possible, but depending on the materials that are needed for that course to teach it in the way that the faculty needs to teach it, you don't have all of those 5 options available for every single class and title.
Yeah.
Right. And so navigating that whole, it's complex, right? It's not like I can just show up and say, hey, I'm signed up for school this year and I'm here to pick up my books. You have all of these choices.
Yeah.
And part of that's regulated too, right? Is like you can't say a student must have this book to pass the course. Yeah. You have to have the knowledge. But yeah, the academic world's a bit complex in some of those ways.
But there are at a campus store, there will be people that know about all of these options and can tell you what they are and tell you ways to, well, just options that you have and how much it's going to cost and how much you'll pay for this and what you'll get, that kind of thing. That's what you're saying. There's people that's what they do. Yeah.
There's a very good one that I can refer you to off the air.
All right. Very good. So maybe more in your area, are there other services or things that you offer that students should be taking advantage of?
So another one I mentioned is computer repair services. I had mentioned it before, but that's usually a good buy as far as, cost. There are often various little shops that you can go to get your needs taken care of, but you might not have a level of trust if you are from out of the area. Yeah. So I would suggest to you that if your university campus offers it, they probably offer it at a pretty good rate, number one.
Okay.
And secondly, it's at a place that you can trust, right? Like they're there for the student.
Yeah.
So for myself, I would say I would have an easier time trusting that person than to say an outside entity that I know nothing about.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's good to know. And so something like computers, and for me that doesn't know much about them. It's kind of like this for cars with me too, that I never know if this thing actually needs to be fixed, if this is an issue, or if they're just telling me that it needs to be to make some money. So it's great
to try to
have
find someone to trust, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's great to know that those services are being offered and for someone.
Yeah, and I would just take that outside of the campus store too, and just say all around campus, there are people like that.
Okay.
Right. And so, spending copious amounts of time online to find your answers. This year you might have to do that, right?
Yeah.
But normally, there are people there who want to help you and who want to get you to the right spot.
Yep.
And they've been like, hopefully you're not there for an undergrad more than 4-ish years. They've been there through many.
That's true. Yeah.
many students' first year experience, right?
Yeah.
So if it's first, second year kind of questions, they've been around the block like many times.
Yeah.
That's a good and a bad thing, but mostly a good thing, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I would mention too is just seeing it as an employment opportunity for a student. Yeah. It's something people don't realize, and it makes things super easy. I'll speak that it's a little bit of a different perspective, but when I was going to school part-time, I had a lot of group projects in the, diploma that I took.
Okay.
Business diploma. And so group work is a big thing in business.
Yep.
And I could schedule, a meeting on my lunch, or I could schedule, a lecture to be half hour after I was off of work, and just have like, I could have a much more compact schedule because I was already on campus.
Yep.
So same thing applies for students. Is there's some employment opportunities there. I don't have to have transportation. I don't need to go anywhere. The people that are working on those campus, in those campus areas like the store, understand student needs as far as schedule. So like, when classes break and so on and so forth. So it's a good option if you're looking for some work while you are a student.
Yeah, that's really good to know. And it's you said especially in like the beginning of the school year is you need a lot of extra hands on deck. Like there are lots of employment opportunities then, or?
Yeah, more so. I would say as time goes on, now I don't know exactly how, say a job in retail at the mall would handle this. But as far as like number of hours per week or whatever, you want to know that somebody's able to dedicate so much time to something. So what we find is students, when you get into midterms and when you get into exams, we have a pretty large staff, but everybody's not working like 5 shifts a week, right? Because we have enough staff so that you can work that 1 or 2 shifts and still get your schoolwork done.
So because you're if you work for a campus store, you're right in the university environment. They like you said, they understand when the busy times are with midterms and so yeah, it's
like don't get me wrong, we don't want people skipping shifts and like making last minute adjustments, but the overall understanding, I would say, is there, and everyone's in the same environment.
Yeah.
So
yeah, very good. Yeah, I guess I'll just ask you if you have anything else that you were prepared to say on kind of the bookstore topic as a whole before we move on.
No, I think we've been around the block on that one.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fascinating to learn. Yeah, so let's move into some of the things that you do, or what your role as a video coordinator for the football team has looked like. So I guess this first question will probably show a little bit of just how little I know about that entire process. But yeah, looking kind of generally, what is the purpose of a video for a football team, or what are they using film for on a regular basis?
Yeah. So, I mean, it might sound a little pompous, but the first word that comes to mind is everything. But I'll qualify what I actually mean by that. So a mentor of mine in the whole football video world thing has said this numerous times, and it always stuck with me. He said it's something along the lines of a successful team and coaches stand on a table supported by four legs, and the four legs are therapy,
Okay.
equipment, video, and sports information. So like
Okay.
anything from statistics to PR, like those folks.
Yep.
Because really, without any of those four things, or when any one of those is missing, the team and the coaches have a tougher time being successful.
Okay. Yeah.
So for video, I would just say it's, again, I would break the preparation or the teaching aspects into probably four different steps. If I would just keeping things general,
Yep.
I would say a football team is kind of works in this cycle of plan, teach, execute, review. Plan, teach, execute, review, like just all the time, particularly in season.
Okay.
So video would be a part of the planning, a part of the teaching, and a part of the review.
Right.
The execution on game day, I can't do a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
Like if a guy doesn't catch a ball, he doesn't catch a ball.
Yeah.
But the video is a huge piece of all the rest of that. So video is like your diary of the game, right? Every play one at a time. We call it game film.
Okay.
So obviously it's not film anymore.
Yeah. No.
So game film, or you might hear the term, if you're talking to Americans, they call it all 22, which is like there's 11 on a side. So you always see all 22 players at any given point.
Within the frame of the shot?
Within the frame.
Yeah.
Unlike TV where you see very close-ups of certain things and it flies between, many cameras in a television production. At its simplest, game film, or all 20, here it would be all 24, because we have 12 on a side, would be an end zone view. So that is tighter. You would see your linemen. And it would be from, in a stadium. If you're in a smaller stadium that doesn't have end zone, high end zone seating, you're probably in a skyjack.
So it's up high.
So it's up as high as you can, because you have to shoot the whole field.
Okay.
And then you have a tight frame that just shows the offensive and defensive line, and I'm going to say a couple body widths outside of the tight ends.
This is on the side, or is this still an end shot that you're talking about?
This would be the end shot.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then the sideline shot is from usually top of the stadium kind of thing, as high as you can get again. And this would be a view where you see everybody on the field.
Okay.
So it's zoomed out fairly far. And you just see everything that happens like you would if you were standing at the top of the stadium. And so for game film to be prepared for a coaching staff, what they need is they want to see every play first from that wide view, so from the side.
Okay.
And then from the tight view, which is from the end zone. So they would, play one. They would see the kickoff from the sideline, and they would see the kickoff from the end zone. And depending on who you're coaching and what you're coaching, you will see different things from those two angles.
Okay.
So at its bare minimum, that's what you need for game film.
Okay.
And then from there, game statistics start getting added.
Okay.
Right. So is it a specials team play? Is it an offensive play? Is it a defensive play?
So are you sorting all of this video into those different categories after a game?
So that would be post-production, yeah. So I can get into what we do into live too, because there is an aspect of live. But yeah, so post-production then is where, the sport info person is there's a team doing stats the whole game. And so what I would do at the end, and this is one of the roles I do myself, because I want to make, number one, it's a bit of a process. And secondly, you want to make sure it's accurate, because everything from there on out is based on it.
Okay.
So marking the sort of making sure that your stats line by line line up exactly with every play that's being played.
Oh, okay. Yep.
And then I'll import all of those stats in when I know the game is, 102 plays long.
Mm-hmm.
And I have 102 lines of statistics.
Okay.
And I will, cross-check various data fields and so on. And then we bring all those data points in, and now the coaches have, in the software we use, they'll be able to pull up, say, all first downs that were, all first and 10s.
So you're kind of putting labels on the different plays or different videos of the different plays so that it's really accessible for a coach? Is that what you're talking about with putting all those statistics in? Or
so think of a big spreadsheet.
Yep.
That has one row of data for every play of your game.
Okay.
And so at that point, when you're running like statistical analysis and stuff, you don't necessarily need the video.
Okay.
Because you're more or less running statistical tendencies at that point.
Yep.
But video and data sort of stay married in the system all the way through.
Okay. Yep.
So if I ever want to pull up the data of those, 30 first down plays against this opponent last year, or this year and last year and 10 years ago, I can do that pretty quickly because it stays as the most boring way to say it. It's like a librarian.
Yeah.
Right. You're just cataloging.
Just organized ways to be able to access things quickly, I guess, is one of the goals with that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, in a perfect world, coaches walk off the field after a practice. So practice is done this way too.
Okay.
Every single practice. Now, we don't necessarily use 2 cameras in our situation. We don't have the staff and resources to go through that much video. So why create it if you can't get through it? So some of the positions, like, again, linemen, would have that end zone view for practice, whereas receivers, and you can think at quarterbacks and receivers, need more space. They would get that wide angle.
Okay. Yep.
And then for a period where you're practicing your actual plays, like in a full team environment, then you would have 2 angles there.
Okay. So you were saying that a coach will have access to a practice's video like right then, or does it?
As soon as he walks off the field.
Okay.
Is the idea. Like as soon after. So
maybe just to jump in, is it like being put right onto a server as soon as it's being shot, or how does that technical part of it work? Yeah.
So unfortunately, I don't have the privilege of, high-speed connectors and wiring to everything. In some scenarios, that's the case. But a lot of and really big programs would still do this. It just gets to be more management. It's just really how you scale the numbers. So memory cards, we're dropping memory cards like halfway through practice, and then somebody runs them into the person who's doing the post. And the post is being, like, the game or the practice is being built as it's happening.
Okay.
So when it ends, that last period or 2 gets put into the system, and when coaches come in within a few minutes after practice, they could start watching it if they want to. A game takes a little longer because we're more meticulous, especially on home games.
Okay.
Because our film is then what gets shared to the league.
Oh, okay.
And on up to, say, the pro teams for draft purposes.
Yeah.
So when we post that copy as the home team, that's one of the primary responsibilities of a home team.
Okay.
Is to have that perfect, clean game.
Yeah.
If I'm on the road, it only affects me and I can fix it.
Okay.
But if I put out something that, isn't quite up to par, I want to make sure it's perfect when it goes up to the exchange.
Yeah. So just back to how coaches use it then. Are they reviewing film constantly with players? And you talked about like teaching and planning and that kind of thing. Is it something that they'll be watching a lot and they'll be showing different parts of, or how is it being used?
Yeah. So they would, I mean, maybe I should walk you through like a typical week.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me think now. It's been a while. Our schedule right now is not typical.
Yeah.
So I believe Monday. So Monday you would review your previous. This is gonna presuming we play on a Saturday because you kind of deal with day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4.
Okay.
So
Yep.
I'll just talk about in days of the week to keep it simpler. So in a normal schedule, Monday would be the day of the week where they look at the last game.
Okay.
So what did we do well? What didn't we do? What do we need to fix from our perspective?
And is the coach just pulling out some things, or are they watching the whole game?
Oh, they'll watch everything
Okay.
multiple times.
Okay.
And that's where I come with analyzing film. Like a line coach could watch every play from the tight view, just looking at guys' feet to see that they're in the right place.
Oh,
like
wow.
it gets to be as technical as they have time
Yep.
to review. So it depends who and what position.
So they review film on Monday, and then
and then the coaches would be developing the plan for your next opponent
okay.
on the Monday as well, and probably they have started that on the Sunday. One thing I've got negotiated in is I don't see the office doors on a Sunday.
Oh, nice.
It's a day that I have set aside. But they will probably start then. And for me I should maybe back up to the Saturday night. Let's just say the Saturday evening, we have, a deadline that all the games have to be posted. So I've already prepared 2 of the team we're playing the following week. I'll have all of their games up until that week.
Okay.
So that's my priority A1 game that I'm waiting for is the one that they're playing today.
Yes.
And that one one has to go in right away. And then once I'm done my work, the coaches can start theirs anytime after that. So kind of Saturday evening, they're already into planning how are we going to beat this next team, or depending on how we did that day, they might want to be looking at ours for their, review.
Yeah.
And then Sunday is just like a light run, like guys to keep their body moving, and they pay for their penalties and so on with a lot of not fun running.
Okay.
And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday would be practices, and every practice would be then reviewed in a meeting. So there would be a meeting and a practice each of those days.
Okay.
And then Friday is just kind of a walkthrough of like, here's our game plan, and you walk through the scripted plays that you will be running at some point. And then generally Saturdays when they play in the afternoon, and then it just repeats itself.
Yeah. Are you directly involved in the shooting and that kind of thing of games, or are you where kind of does your role fit in that by now?
So it's grown over time. So now we also do instant replay in game. So that's a live thing.
Okay.
So now I have a kind of a production person, so to speak, in what we call the spotters booth, which is essentially up in the press boxes area of, the stands somewhere. And depending on the stadiums, it's not all that great. But somebody there will be taking we just have one camera feed for that instant replay, the wide angle. And that within a second or two of the play completing, it's on all the coaches' iPads on the sideline and in the spotters booth. So they have up in the spotters booth guys during the game coaches monitoring what's going on.
Okay.
So they can verify what actually happened versus what it looked like might have happened when they were on the field, because field level, you don't get the full perspective. Right. And I mean, you learn things both ways.
Yeah.
So we do the instant replay as well. So that's more people. So I really am the coordinator part of it.
Okay.
The things I do generally is the film exchange, the data, the initial sort of statistical data.
Okay.
And also from a league perspective, I'm just watching the quality of those games that is going up on the exchange,
Okay.
looking for problems, helping guys who maybe don't have a lot of experience
Oh, yeah.
in it, and trying to keep that exchange as clean as
Okay.
possible.
Yep. Very good. This is so thinking about some of these Ontario University games would be broadcasted on TV, right?
So currently, they're not on any major
Oh, okay.
TV station. That's another industry that struggled with production costs and so on.
Yeah.
So essentially, for amateur sports in Canada, you pretty much have to pay to get on TV. So
Oh, okay.
like it,
Got you.
it's sad, but it's cheaper for them to bring in a feed of an American game
Yeah.
than it is to send a production crew to an Ontario stadium to
Right. Well,
you know.
I guess that kind of makes sense economically because those games are already being produced, and it's just kind of a service that you're just paying for. But yeah, I mean, it's too bad for fans of the sport that
So
watch it.
it is all live streamed. So I don't know, going to university, you may know this or may not, but every university has a similar Actually, I
Mm-hmm.
think we all use the same live streaming platform.
Yeah.
This year it's a lot of archives
Yeah.
and like highlight games from history. Um, but you can watch most sports, and the quality really varies depending on, but they usually do pretty well with, like, I'll say the big three sports like basketball, or big four, soccer, basketball, hockey, and football
Yeah.
would be done fairly well.
So is those watching those live streams, would that be from your video from that you're taking, or is that totally
No, there'd
separate?
be a separate team doing
Oh,
that,
okay.
because again, what I want is not what they necessarily want for
Yes, okay.
live stream.
That's where I was going with that. Is that's totally different cameras, positions?
So positions would probably be similar.
Okay.
Although a lot of webcasts are really just doing a couple cameras from the sideline,
Yeah.
like multiple angles from the stands, because that's easier to produce.
Okay.
With their setups that they have to do in a smaller stadium without wiring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then, I'm doing things with like wireless and
Okay.
different systems that didn't exist but are now pretty good. So
Okay.
like getting the video to iPads all within a couple seconds is possible now. Whereas back when I started, I was trying to do things with, still pictures that
Okay.
way, because it's useful for a coach to see a still picture of a pre-snap formation, like how
Oh,
they're
okay.
lined up.
But now that can be
Now it's
wirelessly
all,
sent to the.
yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it still sounds like it's a complicated process to make that all happen, but
It's a juggling act,
okay.
because I would just say I'm always, I guess, proud of the fact that of the amount of output that we can do with the resources that we have.
Okay. Yeah.
Like we put out quite a bit for the amount that we have, invested in it.
Yeah.
And certainly it wouldn't work without having like good volunteers at different positions, and things like that. But students do enjoy that opportunity too. Some of them are former players or high school players that can stay involved in the team that way.
No, that's great. Maybe that just what you're talking about, how you try to use your resources to your maximum capabilities and things. Do you get a sense of how your setups compare to bigger programs like U.S. college football or even CFL, NFL kind of things? Like, do they just have? Is it a totally different experience there, or what's it like?
So in some ways it's the same. And so what I mean by that is, I could confidently walk into any CFL video office
Okay.
and be right at home with what they do.
Okay.
We're using the same software, and the same applies for college and NFL, although there's a couple more software competitors in the space just because of the amount of football that's played in the US.
Yep.
So some of the systems I would need, if I'd walk in the door there trying to do something, I would need to get caught up on that specific software. But the overall premise and, way of organizing things and the way of managing a practice are similar. but the difference is numbers. Like it's just exponentially bigger.
As far as
Everything.
like how much they're shooting and
How many pairs of shoes you get, how many coaches are sitting up top during a game, how many players are in their facilities, how
right.
many customized breakfast smoothies they get at their, private dining area. To if they're running practice, they'll probably run it on multiple fields.
Okay. Yep.
And say like they may have 12 or 15 cameras where I have two.
Okay.
And so now you need a guy in a golf cart who is going between all those spots at the end of every practice period, grabbing that bag of SD cards, so to speak.
Yep.
And all that person does is run between cameras.
Okay.
And brings it back to the office where then you've got more video to put in. So now instead of one person sitting in there, you have 4 people sitting in there, maybe. And they're building practice as it comes in.
Yeah.
And then, some facilities have it all wired back directly.
Okay.
Depending on how new their facility is. But I would just say it's scale. It's mostly just scale. And yeah, like I mentioned, my one assistant had worked in the CFL office for a few years, and enjoyed that aspect too. But
Okay, yeah. Well, just maybe along that, you mentioned to me that you do some coordination with the CFL, maybe the NFL too, as far as like they're looking at your video for draft analysis and that kind of thing. Is that what they use it for? Or?
Yeah, so that would be the primary reason. And by far the majority is with the CFL being in Canada. So part of the CFL is that they have to always have a certain ratio of Canadians on the field.
Right.
Like that's one of the
it's a rule of the
foundational rules. Yeah. So the Canadian draft is the way that they get those players onto their teams.
Okay.
Generally speaking. And so they would use, in the case of U Sports, which is Canadian University Sports, those games are all shared centrally, and they would be able to get them within they have access pretty much as soon as we do for our exchange.
Yep.
So a day or so after, they're usually in there, and they will keep that library so that they can watch players that they want to watch for the draft. So same thing with NFL, except we don't have, like, it's just sheer numbers. Like, I refresh my memory before coming on here just to kind of look at numbers of like college players in the States and stuff, and it's ridiculous.
Okay.
I think it's probably best just to break it down to like the percentage. I think it is like 1.6% of all college players will get drafted.
Yeah.
And drafted players don't all play, right? So, if an NFL, where I'm going with this is if an NFL team is interested in a player of mine or of ours, they will ask for all of our film, and I will take care of that exchange kind of one-on-one.
Yeah.
Because they have, it's a very big league, many dollars tied up, right? And so they have a process, and lots of signatures needed and whatever else.
Okay.
But they kind of need to come looking for you, or they need an agent or a scout or somebody that says, I want to see your guy.
So will they ask for like an edit of just a specific player, and then you have to do that, or you just give them
because edits you can cheat.
Okay.
I can get 10 good plays from any guy.
Yeah. So they want everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
They want to see what you did every single time, especially at the pro level. They want to know if even practice film.
Okay.
We don't give practice film as a general rule, but they will probably, at least for Canadian scouts, and you'd have to have a guy with a lot of hoopla around him to get NFL scouts out to your practice.
Right.
But you might. They want to see them practice though too, right?
Yeah.
Before they know if he's going to give 80%.
So
or 100.
Just to clarify though, like they're wanting, if let's say the NFL is interested in one of your players, will they want just like all the film of that player, or can you just hand off all of the games that player played in to them, and that's all you have to do with it?
Yeah, I think they usually would ask me for the whole game.
Okay.
Because chances are they might be on specials and one side of the ball.
Right.
In At that point, it's easier for them just to do the whole game, and then as opposed to just sending them the defense, for example.
Yeah. Does the difference in rules between Canadian and American football come into play at all in your work, or do they understand the difference if they're interested in a Canadian player?
Yeah, I would say they understand the differences. Certain guys are suited for one game or the other,
Okay. Yeah.
depending on their body type. Um, so a guy that's undersized in the U.S. might be good in the Canadian side
Okay.
because the Canadian version, you only have 3 downs to get somewhere, so you need to have, let's just say, in a general sense, more speed guys, more guys that can do multiple things.
Yeah.
Whereas the NFL will just have a lot of really big specimens.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Did you said that at one point, I think, that you didn't have a lot of experience or knowledge of football before starting in this role. Do you have to have a really good understanding of the game and the rules, how to play it, that kind of thing to do your video coordinating job, or is there just certain things that you had to learn and learn how to do well?
Yeah, and so no, you don't need to have a specific understanding of football, but as with anything, it helps, right? And so the longer I've been in it, the more I sort of understand what they're trying to do as a coach and how I might support them. Because there's, again, technology that can do things that maybe a coach isn't aware of.
Okay.
Right. And so understanding how I could make their meeting better, or, they say it's easy to do something, but I know it should only be 1 click and they're doing like 14 clicks.
Oh, yeah.
Right. At the beginning, I would have had no concept of what their job is.
Yeah.
And it was just focused solely on surviving and getting like that first copy of the game in their hands so that they could do whatever they needed to do, and they would just figure it out. So the biggest thing of my volunteers too is I'm like, I don't care if you know anything, but you have to be, first of all, I guess, comfortable with cameras and technology, and secondly, show up. I can train the rest.
Yeah, but you need like that.
If you're not there, I can't So the whole scheduling thing is just be reliable, and the rest can be taught.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, I was kind of jumping around in the questions that I had written down here. Did you have other things that you wanted to say as or that you'd prepared to say on the whole video coordinating role before we move on?
I would just say people probably wonder, why do you even bother, right?
Yeah.
So I would say there's a few reasons there. One is I like working in higher education. This is a general statement again in all my roles, because I see it as part of a lot of, transition from teens to 20s. So people from all walks of life, many countries, on an athletics team, it's people from definitely different economic situations, different home situations. So I feel like I am part of their life education, and if I can in some way, whether it's just with being friendly when nobody else is being friendly, or whatever, that I can be one of those good positive touch points in their university career, or maybe when things aren't going well on the athletic side, I'm still treating them the same and knowing that they matter whether or not they're playing on a Saturday. Because there's an awful lot of guys in a program on any team that you don't even see on the field.
They're showing up for practices and then they're riding the bench for the games.
Right. So, and it takes those guys to make your starters what they are. So being a part, so that's one reason. The other thing is like I mentioned, I think early in the podcast, is there's a correlation to how excited people are about campus.
Yeah.
So athletics is always a piece of, the excitement around athletics and what we sell and the colors we sell and, products that we might bring in for, the hockey moms or the football moms,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
are proud of their kids.
Yeah.
They're all like really interconnected. So
Yeah.
there's just kind of a natural fit there with athletics and the other, I'll say, spirit wear and
Yeah.
rah stuff we sell.
When you were telling me about your two roles, I was like, they seem to me to be quite different, but I hadn't thought about how connected those are. If team spirit is or school spirit is high on campus, then that's going to help you in the store and things like that. So yeah, it's fascinating.
And then the last thing is it's still the one sort of tech support job I have.
Okay.
Right? Like I really like that piece of my
It's neat, yeah.
career too. And I enjoy what I do now, no doubt about it. But it's still kind of nice to have my foot kind of one foot in that support technology role.
Yeah, one of your passions and loves. Yeah, yeah, it's great. Yeah, this might be a good time to kind of see if you have advice, and maybe that's what you were talking about there. But did you have other things to kind of that you wanted to share from your experience, or things that you've learned that you'd like others to know?
So I mean, I've probably mentioned these already to some degree, but as far as advice to maybe university students is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Whether that's anxieties and pressures of a student career and living on your own for the first time, whether it's just where do I find stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a part of your life where a lot of change is taking place, and even if everything is ideal in your world, and it's not for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I've been blessed with, so many things that, the more I'm around, I see others haven't been. Home life and just, the different privileges that we grew up with in my community. And so I'd say don't be afraid to ask for help. And kind of that philosophy with my video assistants of like show up and I can train you the rest.
Yeah.
Like, just be a willing participant in opportunities that you have. And for myself, I mean, the way I challenge myself is just to always be genuine in your beliefs, number one, and the care that you give to others as you're living those beliefs.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that just don't smile enough. I look at education as being one of those foundational ways that people learn critical thinking.
Okay. Yeah.
And so kind of came to my mind, I was like, this is where I should give like English teachers a shout out. I just feel like early on, I didn't have that appreciation for, like, elementary school, things are pretty black and white.
Yeah.
I'm like, just give me the test. It's either a right answer or a wrong answer. I'll argue with you about the marks because I know it's right. Right. And so this whole like transition to like, there's not necessarily just one answer here.
Yeah.
And reasoning. I feel like English teachers have a big piece of that. And I thought of, one of your previous guests, your Aunt Sharon, being, one of those formative people for me.
Yeah.
And really then as I was thinking, I'm like, I had like all my English teachers were like that, right? They're trying to pull that reasoning out of you. And so don't underestimate the importance of, the high school and elementary school educators that are setting the foundations, because that's really what higher education is about too, is being able to discern truth.
Yep.
And being able to, point out error in a loving way too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I like the things that you think about are so important. And I mean, you're not teaching, or in your role in education. But I like that you bring out that your role is critical and important in supporting the educational system, the university in this case, system, and how important a role that you have in that. And I like that you're willing to acknowledge and say that's your role is important in that, and there are impacts that you can make and important things that you can do. So I think that's great. Did you have other things that you wanted to say along with that before we wrap it up here?
No, I think we'll see how it sounds when you publish this, but I feel like we've had a good chat, and I thank you for letting me join you and have this talk.
Well, yeah, I was glad that you did, and I knew I had a vague idea of what some of the things that you do are, and so I didn't know how interested you'd be in talking to me. So when you kind of gave me a brief overview of some of the things that we could talk about, I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely something that I'd be interested in, especially in my current situation. So glad that you were willing to come and share, and hopefully others can learn from it as well. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you everyone for listening, and thank you, Kerry, for sharing your knowledge with us. I enjoyed the entire conversation, but I was really struck at the end when Kerry was talking about how the work that he does fits into the bigger picture of education and helping young people to develop and build a strong foundation for the rest of their lives, and how he can be a part of that. And I was really encouraged and inspired by the words that he shared there. So thank you, Kerry, for coming on the podcast and sharing your experience and your knowledge with us. As always, if you'd like to learn more about the show or this specific episode, you can visit the podcast website. That's everydayexpertise.ca. If you'd like to connect with me for any reason, a good way to do that is through the email contact@everydayexpertise.ca. And let me know what you think of the show, or if you have anything to share with me, that would be great. That's all for now. Join me again next week to learn from the expertise of everyday people.